Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Appraisal Buzzcast. We have a really special episode for you today. You're really going to want to pay attention. If you aren't already subscribed, please take a second and click the subscribe button below to get notified when our latest Buzzcast is published every week. Today, we'll be speaking with Joan Trice, CEO of Allterra Group, and Danny Wiley and Sean Murphy of Freddie Mac. We'll be discussing UAD and what it means for appraisers. Joan?
Thank you, Jim and Sean and Danny. Welcome. We've got an exciting topic today, and I'm sure we're going to have a very large audience of appraisers who want to learn about the UAD update project. So why don't you guys fill us in on what's going on?
Absolutely. So UAD, we are coming up with a new design. And the whole purpose of this is to address the situation where the old forms were really made for typewriters. And we're looking at a legacy of doing things in a very old-fashioned way with data that's somewhat encrypted to the average reader. When it comes to the abbreviations, when one looks at an appraisal report, for the homeowner, they may not understand what a C6 is, much less all the various abbreviations when it comes to the garage, much less patio deck, whatever it might be. We will still have the standard of C6 and Q6s and Q1s and C1s, but we will be having more standardization through the report as we go through. So one of the aspects of doing this is to make a more standard approach for appraisers to select criteria, characteristics they would see on a regular basis, but also be consistent in the way they're reported on our report for the UAD. And this would incorporate all of the forms, we're not just tweaking the current UAD forms, we're actually going to be incorporating all of the forms that we've been working with, from co-ops, 2 to 4, manufactured home. All of that now will be in a one dynamic UAD report. Danny, do you have anything to say?
I think that's a good overview there, Sean. I think one of the key aspects of this too is replacing the massive text addendum that we generally find in reports today, right? We call it the Uniform Residential Appraisal Report, but the only thing really uniform are the first 6 pages, right? And when we look at the average residential appraisal report today, they tend to be 30-ish pages long or so. And so a whole lot of the meat of the appraisal report is buried in text addendum. And I think that's a source of a lot of frustration. And it's a source of a lot of revision requests. Right now, underwriters, reviewers, AMC folks, they analyze reports, and every time they pull a report up, they have to go on a bit of an Easter egg hunt to find key elements inside the appraisal report. And so, as Sean said, one big step of this is taking all 10 of the current forms and putting them into one data set and producing a relatively consistent output. The other is to eliminate, to the degree actually possible, the text addendum, and to have that text moved into the main body of the report in a more modern way, and in a way that will make it easier for the users of those reports to find that information, right? An example I use today, if you have a single family home with an ADU, well, you mark one with ADU on page 1, and then it's sort of left to the appraiser to figure out how to squeeze that onto page 2. Right? There's no, the adjustment grid is static today, which means it doesn't change, right? In the future state, when the appraiser marks one with ADU, then the adjustment grid will change. It will expand to include specific fields dedicated to ADU. And that's just one example where we're trying to make the report more customized for the features that the subject property actually has.
That sounds like a huge undertaking. When did you all begin this project? And Danny, when do you see it going to market, or at least in a pilot?
Sean leads our internal group on that and has a long history with that. So I'll let him address some of the history.
Sure. Joan, we'll talk about the future in a little bit, but I'll jump right in about the history. We jumped into this whole project in 2018, and we wanted to make sure we crafted what the requirements were going to be, what was going to be needed for this undertaking. So we knew that we wanted to get outside opinions. And we've got a great team of appraisers working on this. We almost have up to 10 appraisers working on this round the clock. It's not just, Sean Murphy's the subject matter expert and we're all going to rely on what Sean Murphy thinks. Heck no, I know I'm not that smart, and we've got a great team. So from Fannie and Freddie, we're working on this 24/7. Well, not 24/7, but 5 days a week, I'll put it that way, and probably thinking about it 24/7. And so in 2018, we made a concerted effort to get the industry's input about what they wanted to see, how we would improve. And we even went up to the Valuation Expo in 2019, fall 2019, Joan, to demonstrate what some of the aspects would be on the subject descriptions, characteristics. And we actually asked for input at that Valuation Expo that you were so gracious to have us. And we really appreciate it, being able to work with the team of evaluation experts that were out there to be able to get their input. And we've been following that mode throughout these past few years now. Danny was an advisor previously to, before he came to Freddie Mac. And now we are also keeping that advisory call with industry experts to keep calibrating the report as we take their feedback and we apply it. So we had a virtual bulletin board where we actually were able to create up some scenarios, your typical single family detached, your typical condo, and then had some oddball ones in there with a 2 to 4 and a manufactured home. Not to say that they're always oddball, but we wanted to create maybe some scenarios that would display the new dynamic fields that were going to be an option now for appraisers to work with. And we wanted to get their input on some of those dynamic options. So we've been working with various people in the industry. We've tried to make sure we bring in as many people in a broad net as possible, not just one location of the country. It's from all over, all of 50 states practically, of getting people's opinions with the various environments they live in, various types of properties they're going to encounter, and try to tailor the new UAD structure to meet those needs. So from there, we've been making the scenarios, we've been taking the feedback we've gotten from the scenarios. As we displayed the scenarios, we've gotten experts to review them and say what they liked about them, what they didn't like about them. That's what we've really been doing this past 2 quarters, have been reviewing the input from their review of our scenarios on the virtual bulletin board to make it a better product. And so we've been taking that advice to heart and we've been implementing it. And so this year, we're really going to be focused on taking those ideas, making them concrete, and then working on advisory or the appraisal guide, the spec for various vendors who are going to be working with this product to make sure that they have the technical characteristics that they need for their end to make sure that they can incorporate the changes we're making. And so that's going to be the bulk of this year, is really taking those ideas, making them concrete, and then explaining what we have with those in an appraisal guide and the various spec reports.
Okay. Well, let's do this. Let me break back to Jim for a second for a commercial message, and then we'll pick up where we left off.
Thanks, Joan. Cicady Capital is a simple and secure payment platform that enables you to get paid the next business day for your appraisals and reduces the time you spend on paperwork and making collection calls. After initial setup, simply submit the invoices you'd like to get paid on to Cicady Capital, and they'll pay you first, then collect the payment from your AMC or lender, leaving you with more time to focus on the appraisals. If you'd like to set up your account to get paid faster on your appraisals, call Cicady Capital support team at 208-953-7234. 208-953-7234, or email them at support@cicady.com, SEKADY.com. Joan, back to you.
Thank you, Jim. All right, gentlemen. So tell me a little bit about the future state and what's the timelines on this project.
Sure, Joan. I think Sean did a great job there, sort of giving the history and getting us to the present day. So where do we go from here? Well, as Sean kind of hinted at, one of the big goals is to have the spec finished by the end of this year. And before I go any further with that, I'll say too that we do have a draft timeline that we intend, as of the recording of this on the 10th, we intend to post that to both the Fannie and Freddie UAD websites very soon. We're just waiting on some final approvals for that. We actually shared it with the advisory group on Monday in draft format, so that you can, if you check the UAD sites by the time this is published, that I suspect the timelines will be there by then. But you don't have to be a rocket scientist to kind of figure out some related timelines, right? If we don't have the spec published until the end of this year, the software companies can't start any kind of development until the specs are fully available, right? We've done a lot of industry outreach, as Sean has said, and most of the software vendors have told us this is a multi-quarter effort for them to reprogram, right? Essentially, they're going to have to rebuild their whole formsware. It's a fundamentally different approach, and it will require sort of starting from the ground up, much different than the first UAD, right? UAD 1.0, we were taking the static forms and sort of adopting them. Now we're eliminating the static forms, and it'll be, I think it's going to be an exciting time, because I think we're going to see various software companies take different approaches on how to tackle the problem. And I think for appraisers, it's going to mean real competition, and for the software folks, real innovation and how it's approached. So anyway, we released the spec the end of this year, probably going to take between 6 and 18 months for the software vendors to get their software actually done, right? And then of course we can't release until we have software on the market. And it's not just the appraiser software, it's all the underwriting systems and all the things that touch the data, right? Yeah. We've actually done a project plan to say all the systems at Freddie Mac that are going to be affected by this. And if I could show you that slide, you'd be amazed at how many things are touched with the UAD data. Yeah.
Well, actually, what you just said leads me to a couple of questions. So one is sort of, where does the forms design end and the software development creativity pick up? Meaning, one of the major time hurdles that I see, and just where mistakes are made, is just even in the ordering process. Will a lot of the data be pre-populated into the form, or is that up to the software providers to reach out to third-party data companies or whomever that they might want to partner with to provide some of that data?
Yeah, a lot of that's going to be up to the software folks. And
Okay.
As the team is working on this, they're really focused on the standard itself and really trying not to be overly prescriptive on how the software will actually work. But it's going to require some fundamental shifts. I mean, right now, pretty much every residential appraisal order that the appraiser gets from the lender or the AMC or however, how do they identify it? They say we need a 1004. They say we need a 1073, right? So they order by form type, and that's going away. Form type itself will go away. So it's not just the appraisal related changes that have to be made. You have to make fundamental changes in how you order an appraisal report.
Well, even transaction platforms, you're right. They have a pick list. Do you want the 1004? Or do you? Yeah, exactly.
Right. And then it goes even deeper. And I used to work at an AMC, and when we did our CNR monitoring, we tracked fees by form types.
Right.
So there's a lot of tentacles that come off of this thing that get affected. And that's why implementation has to be done at the right rate to allow people to adjust and modify their systems.
Wow, you've just opened up a whole can of worms. That sounds like a whole other session. I think I'm going to have a lot of questions for you offline for sure.
I will say that one of the things that we're getting a little bit of challenge on at this point is some of those who are going to have to make those changes have started to think through that and basically said, wow, I'm going to have to write a big check. And so we're getting really challenged on the benefits versus the cost. So I'd like to just a couple of quick points on that. The MISMO standard is old. It's not supported anymore. And so at some point, we're going to have to make a change, right? The technology just won't keep working if we're using a standard that's not even supported anymore, right? Well, some have said, well, why don't you just update the MISMO? Why do you have to go through all this? Well, if you update the MISMO, you're going to have the same level of pain, right? You still have to change all your systems and all the related stuff. And our thinking is, well, if you're going to have to do that, why not do the other improvements at the same time? We'd rather have one period of pain than have to go through it twice. The other factor is the return on investment. I know when I worked at the AMC, we processed thousands of reports a day. We kicked thousands of reports a day back out to appraisers for revision requests. I think this new format's really going to cut down on that. I know when I read the blogs, the Facebook groups, appraisers are constantly complaining, I got this revision request in the report. You know,
Tell me where you buried it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I remember chatting with an appraiser specifically, and he said, my prior service comment is right there on this page. And I went and looked at it, and it was a full legal page typed in all caps with no paragraph returns.
Oh.
But somehow I'm supposed to find that statement in there, right? With the new UAD and the dynamic nature, first of all, the comment won't be embedded in a text addendum. So that if you're talking about a repair item that needs to be completed, then you'll have space in that field to address that repair item with a comment, include the photo right there. Right. So it really should cut down on this back and forth of I can't find it in the report. But
now where am I supposed to put my boilerplate language?
Yeah. That's my fears actually, is that just out of habit, people will,
everybody will have a meltdown because they need that boilerplate in there. So
yeah. But I mean, if you think about the design of the reports we have today, and you think how out of date they really are, right? Why are the comp pictures in the back of the report, right?
Yeah,
if you were doing it today, you would put the comp pictures on top of the grid, right over the adjustments, and a little thumbnail, and you could click on it and bring up the picture, right? That seems so obvious if you think about what we would do with a blank sheet of paper. But instead, for the last decade, even though we've had the technology, we've kept putting the comp pictures in the back of the report because that's what we used to do when I started in this business almost 40 years ago. You tape the pictures on the last page of the report with a double-sided tape machine. And when we went to PDF, we didn't change any of that.
I don't know which was more technically forward, but
right.
I miss the rub-off arrows on the map days myself.
And the little worms when you ordered your rub-off?
Yeah, I got the worm. Yep, exactly. All right, well, let's break one more time for a commercial message. We'll be right back.
Appraisers, in uncertain times, you need a certain partner. You don't have to sacrifice top-notch coverage for an affordable premium. Intercorp has all the options and is sure to have just the right one to fit your specific needs. They provide the appraisal profession with competitive, best-in-class E&O coverage solutions nationwide. Having served the insurance needs of the industry for more than 25 years, Intercorp understands the risks you face every day, whether you're an individual appraiser, appraisal firm, residential, commercial, or an AMC. Visit intercorpinc.net to get a competitive quote today. Back to you.
Thank you, Jim. And I can't resist the opportunity to talk about Valuation Expo here because I've got my background with the Bellagio going on, and there's a reason for that. We are planning on having it. We're optimists. We're planning on September the 8th through the 10th in Las Vegas at the Bellagio, and we're really excited about that, to see everybody live and in person. Let's assume for a minute, gentlemen, I know you can't speak for the company policy, but if you all are allowed to participate, do you think you'll have some unveiling of the form in whatever shape it's in at that time?
I would think we would have some of the scenarios. Yes, our hope is to have scenarios that can be disseminated to the public and be for various situations that an appraiser may encounter. And so we are hoping that would be available at that time. I would be very surprised if that is not available. And so one would be able to see what a 2 to 4 might look like. One would be able to see what the manufactured home would look like, and single family, condo, the various other aspects that appraisers are encountering in the field.
Excellent.
So,
you know, Jen, I think the challenge is we can have those examples ready, but there will be no actual software at that point. And I think that's going to be conceptually the most difficult thing for appraisers to grasp, because I'm in the same boat. My whole career, we've used static forms.
Right.
And to truly understand the shift from a static form to a dynamic data set is a little tough to envision, right? We've seen that on some of our virtual bulletin board feedback. Some who've commented, it's like, okay, you got to realize this is just one possible version right? Because the things like the adjustment grid could change. That's a difficult concept if you've never worked in that environment, and nobody has.
Do you have any concept of, on the lender side, on the reviewer side, how many lenders are reviewing manually as opposed to in an automated fashion?
As far as hard numbers, no. We do know there's great diversity. Some of them do rely pretty much on a manual process. Many of them have very advanced review systems that actually take the XML and rearrange it to the betterment of their reviewers. I know some of them, for example, if you have an appraisal report with 5 or 6 comps, it'll rearrange it so that all the 5 or 6 comps come up on the screen beside each other because they're looking at the XML, not just the PDF.
Right.
And honestly, the more complex review system you have, the more work you're going to have to do to adopt to a new UAD. Right?
Yeah, I was actually thinking the opposite on the manual side. If I'm used to seeing something in the right-hand corner of the second page, and it now, because you have an expandable format, it now got shifted to the bottom of the third, if that's gonna like throw off everybody's cadence.
So that is a possibility, Joan. The reality is pages may not be as standardized as they were in the past, where everyone knew what page 1 meant, everyone knew what page 2 meant on the 1004. In this situation, everyone's going to know where the subject section is. It's going to be sequential. The sections will be consistent. If a particular item is addressed with the garage is always going to come after a certain improvement. And so the various outbuildings that might be encountered, again, that would be after the interior improvements. So there'll be sections that are consistent in their sequential order. And to your earlier point, how many people manually read the report versus machine read? The best part about this, it's going to be more readable both for a machine readable situation and manual review. The layout, which will be much more concise and more logical in the sense that if you're going to make a comment, you're not going to bury it on the page 30 of what some random addendum was in the past. You're going to make that comment right at the section. If you find an issue, I know you were asking about revisions, and the reality is we've done some polling ourselves to see what were the top revisions, and some of those issues were the health and safety issues. With every section that the appraiser encounters in the property, they'll be able to identify the defects that they find, a deficiency. If there's something that's affecting the soundness of the property, the safety of the property, it's going to be identified. The appraiser is going to call it out so that it's readily available to the reviewer to see that this is an issue. And then the appraiser is going to recommend an action, what needs to be done regarding that defect. And it's going to be much more easily understood that if a characteristic is found that's of concern, the appraiser is going to immediately address it right at that spot about what needs to be done, if it's subject to inspection or some type of repair. And the reviewer will be much better informed about what that means and not have to flip pages and pages back to the back of the report. And with that said, I know the concern is, well, isn't this going to blow up all the pages? This thing's going to be, twice as long, twice as big with all these new characteristics and dynamics that you're entering into the report. We've done some studies, and the scenarios we've made have actually shown that the pages are very similar to what they are nowadays, if not smaller, because we're able to make things more concise where they belong and not have to have things spill over into random addenda. So it's one of these things where, because of the concise nature of what we're doing, is going to be making a better report that's readable for everybody.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. It's really exciting. I mean, I think appraisers probably can't wait to see what their software vendor's doing. And I kind of agree with you, Danny. I think this could be a giant shift because not all the forms are there. There's lots of opportunities for creativity from the vendors.
I see software. I see lots of possibilities, right? I look at, and everybody said the TurboTax example in the past, but I see people going down that kind of route, right? Where you either present, and I've done TurboTax both ways, because you can either answer the questions or you can pull up that section of a form you need and fill it out. And I could see appraisal software vendors taking the same approach, where You might answer questions. You might go to a certain section of the output and fill it in directly. You might use a combination. I think the vendors will get very creative in how they solve this.
Well, and to that end, so just to make sure I understand and our audience gets to benefit from this, this will be a cloud-based form. Is that correct?
Well, cloud-based or not, it'll be up to the software vendor themselves.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
The data set itself, if you just look at raw data, the data set itself is huge compared to the current UAD. But before you overreact on that, think about it. We're basically taking 10 forms and all the unique data elements and putting them into one data set, right? So yes, the data set itself is enormous compared to today. But if you're doing a single family, you're not going to need all those data points that are unique to a co-op.
Right.
Right. So as Sean said, when we examine the output, they're very similar in length. And I think I want to go back to one of the things that Sean said there about our outreach. We have reached out to lenders and AMCs and appraisers and really tried to identify what are the most common reasons that you get a report kicked back for revision. And the team, I give them high marks. They've spent a lot of time saying, what can we do to help with that problem, right? What can we do to reduce the kickback for can't find this, omitted this? And so that's been one of the focuses here, right? So it's not, one of the things we want to do is make it easier, both for the appraisers and the users of the appraisal reports.
Right.
Now, to your point, if you've been an underwriter or an appraiser for 25, 30 years, you're used to seeing things in a certain place. And that will go away. But remember what I said before, there's 10 to 20 pages of this stuff that has no uniform formatting at all. So yeah, the first 6 pages look the same, but after that, it's all holds barred.
Your Easter egg hunt.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think people will quickly adjust to the fact that they're not identical, but they are in the same order. Now, it won't be immediate. There will be learning curve for sure. But like when the first UAD came out, at first, within the first month or two, appraisers were, they only wanted to use the new UAD when they had to.
Right.
Right. And so when we would order appraisals back then, it was a big deal to the appraiser. Oh, does this have to be in UAD? Well, about 6 months later, that totally flipped 180 because now they were used to it. And then they would get upset if it wasn't UAD.
Right.
They said, I just want to do it one way.
Right.
So I think we'll see a similar thing, right? It'll take some adjustment. Most appraisers, when I use my form software, going through my form software was like getting in the car and going to the grocery store. It's an autonomic thing. You've learned it, you've used it so much, you know the function keys. You really don't have to think much about typing that appraisal report. When you switch software, and that's essentially what this is going to make everybody do, is switch software. Even if you stay with the same software, you're switching software, right?
Exactly.
And I've said in the past, it's easier to get an appraiser to switch from one religion to another than to get them to change appraisal software.
That's probably a true statement.
But this is going to make everybody switch, and there will be a time, we know there'll be some time there where you're inefficient and you have a learning curve and whatnot, but we really think in the long term, it'll be beneficial.
Benefits there for sure. Well, gentlemen, that was a fascinating conversation, and thanks for joining us today. And I hope to see you at the Bellagio. Keep your fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Thanks for
Thank you,
having us
Joan.
here, John. We really appreciate it.
Sure. That was fun.
Thank you.
Well, speaking of new technology, ProxyPix is the first of its kind on-demand system for getting the location-specific media you need from wherever you are. Their simple-to-use platform creates an online marketplace matching people needing property photos with proxies or data collectors near the requested location. Through crowdsourcing, you can get your current up-to-date photos of anything on the map within hours, if not minutes. Never before has it been quicker, simpler, or more economical to get property photos you need. Sign up at proxypix.com or download the app, available in the Apple or Google Play Store. Well, thank you so much, Danny and Sean, for joining us. That was really an interesting talk. You know, when we said we were going to be talking about data, I was worried about it, but it was really one of our best episodes. We appreciate your help and giving us an advanced look, and we can't wait to hear more. Thanks again to all the listeners, and we hope to hear from you soon.